My name is Emily Cullen, and I'm the Mescal UL 50 Poet in Residence at the University of Limerick's Creative Writing programme. Together with students from the MA in Creative Writing, we're delighted to bring you a series of Espresso Shots of Thought, a project we began last year to explore poetry and poetic process. What inspired me to devise these short segments was a quote by British Indian poet Daljit Nagra, who said that poetry is an espresso shot of thought. So we invite you to relax and enjoy an insightful jolt of poetry from the University of Limerick.
The relationship between poetry and prose is fluid and interchangeable. A poet might use prose to draft what they want their poem to say before condensing it, get the idea on paper before whittling it down to the most compact version of itself. Many famous authors dabbled in both prose and poetry: James Baldwin, Dylan Thomas, Sylvia Plath. But novelists need not release a collection to benefit from poetry. Even reading poetry now and again can teach us as prose writers much about image and detail, concision of thought, and musicality of language. Today, we'll focus on how a prose writer might avail of poetry's insights as a valuable tool. My name is Amy, and this is my Espresso Shot of Thought. Creating poetry is excellent practice for honing the craft of writing itself. Every word in a poem needs to be significant. This encourages us as prose writers to really think about what we're putting on the page. Over time, this critical approach can enrich our ability to write stronger sentences, hash out the finer details, and keen our eye to what's important about the storylines we draft. To quote Pushcart Prize nominee Lisa Dale, poetry forces us to get to the point and to choose words that multitask. Using the least amount of words possible means finding words that convey multiple ideas or multiple meanings all at once. This can help tighten the text of our prose. The shorter nature of a poem can encourage us to focus on one specific thing in great detail, digging deep into the nuance of our subject so that we might paint an accurate picture. To enact a microscopic lens on the world, to study our subject with intention, even further than to see it, but to smell it, taste it, touch it, or hear it, grounds us in rich sensory description that we can capture on our pages. Enhancing our senses in this way allows us to notice and include details that will ground the reader in our stories in turn. And through practice, it can lead us to spot things others might miss. This also then teaches us to pinpoint the extraordinary in the ordinary and can help our prose stand out with the spoils of our vivid, unique studies of the specifics. It's important to note that there's ample room for experimentation in poetry, just like there is in prose. There's no correct form. A poem needn't always rhyme, nor does it have to maintain a specific beat or iambic pentameter. We can play with poetry just like we can play with prose. Experimenting with poetry can yield interesting results for the stickier parts of our stories. As prose writers, I'm sure we've all faced the struggle of capturing an emotion, perhaps a rite of passage for all writers as we get to know our characters and how they react. We know what we want to express, but forming tangible words from that is another thing altogether. Poetry can help us untangle the thoughts and feelings of not only ourselves, but our narrative characters. Using the constraints of a poem to our advantage allows us to hone in on one emotion or one emotional reaction at a time. Character development isn't usually considered synonymous with poetry, but it's an often untapped way to get into our characters' heads. We can go beyond characters and their emotions. It can be easy to feel overwhelmed as a prose writer when balancing multiple events, layers, and nuances inside higher word counts. If you're struggling with a particular scene and aren't sure what's missing, consider writing a poem that describes only that scene. Constraints allow focus, the poem a magnifying glass that sharpens your attention. This can be useful when assessing what your scene might need, or what's most useful about it, or where to go next. So even if you identify primarily as a prose writer, poetry can be a very useful tool in your repertoire to take out and put back in again as you need. The practice of poetry greatly complements the practice of prose writing and vice versa. Both poems tell stories, both are involved with capturing a picture. Next time you find yourself facing writer's block or unsure of your story's next steps, why not give poetry a try?